Hey there, everybody. It's Steve the Amateur. Hold on a second. Do I have a space? Do I? Yes. Hi, how's it going? Steve the Amateur historian. Woohoo! How you doing? It's June 22nd today, and you know what that means? Another day, another story. But before we get there, remember, as always, you want to help my channel grow and blossom. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out there. I'm trying to post things there multiple times a week, giving you a whole bunch of extra stuff that you can only get to and see if you become a Patreon supporter today. The link to that is in the description with this video, along with the links to my Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Reddit subreddit pages, channels, whatever you want to call them. A bunch of extra stuff. So all that said, let's get to today's, well, it's not really a story. It's something a little bit different. Thin folks who would be fat. That's the name of this little piece. And it's not a newspaper article like most of the episodes in this series are based on. It's more of like a little brief advice snippet, if you will. Essentially says, there's not one thin man. They go on to correct themselves and say, and they go on to say excessively thin man, but initially they're just like, thin man. There's no thin man out there who doesn't want to put a few extra pounds on. And I'm like, said no one ever, aside from somebody who maybe is like, an athlete and needs to beef up a little bit. But as far as just gaining weight for the sake of gaining weight, it's not a common thing. And that's what you want, but most people do not want to get heavier. They usually want to get thinner for the most part. But I mostly honed in on this article. I mean, the title certainly got my attention, but I just love how these little health pieces would pop up over and over again in relation to just an assortment of different things, what you should take. I swear, every newspaper from the 20s I read, there's something in there, have phosphate, put phosphate into your body. I'm like, okay, maybe I will. I'm not gonna trust your 1920s science, but let me figure it out for myself. So I saw this article and I read the first sentence and I'm like, where are they going with this? And whether it was super interesting or super intriguing or not, didn't really bother me too much. I just wanted to see where this was going, because again, I see articles like this all the time in these old newspapers. So I just thought, at least once, I gotta kind of dive in and take a look at one of these. And it's interesting because of the way that they discuss people. Again, they start just by talking about thin men. I don't even think they reference women. It's just about men, thin men. And then they go on to say excessively thin men. And it's interesting because they kind of dabble with their wordplay. They kind of dabble with the idea of addressing some men who are thin as having eating disorders. And I'm not even sure what the science, or the health science was really even at back, some 100 years ago when stuff like this was getting published, how much they really understood about eating disorders specifically. I don't think it was that much, if anything. So it was interesting to see verbiage kind of hinting, they weren't saying like, oh, you're super thin because maybe you have an eating disorder, maybe you have anorexia or bulimia or something along those lines. But they would say, if you're an extremely thin man, you suffer from malnutrition, which, is the case for some. Some people are just really thin. And obviously, if you're suffering from an eating disorder, there's always the possibility, of course, that you're malnourished. So I at least give them credit there for ancient analysis pointing out, hey, if you're extremely thin, you might have some issues with you. Because I'm thinking the average man on the street, it's like nowadays we know so much more about health. We know so much more about it. There's so many diseases and ailments that we've learned about now that just weren't around back then, or at least weren't known about back then. So back in the day, it seems like a lot of people, you don't know as much about your health, and so in some ways you don't worry about it as much. Until you get sick or until you start feeling yourself running down and breaking down, you just kind of kept going. It's kind of the case, rough and tumble old days. And now what's interesting about malnutrition, like when we think of, now I'm certainly not a health expert, but when we think about malnutrition these days, we think pretty much it's not necessarily just that you're not taking in enough food, but it's that you're not taking in enough nutrients that you need to function properly, or at least function at the best you can. So it's kind of this idea that you're not getting enough of certain things. But in this article, it refers to malnutrition as essentially your body, and see again, now this is where I'm not a health expert because I don't know if there's any validity to this. In fact, a lot of this I don't really know how accurate or inaccurate it is. Considering how old the article is, I assume a lot of it is very inaccurate. But I'm more putting this up for people to kind of look at and to think and reflect on, especially if there's any people with a strong health background. You can come on here and be like, yeah, Steve, that's actually was accurate in that old article. They'll come on and be, Steve, that was a bunch of shit. That was not accurate at all. So the article describes malnutrition more as an illness, where when you eat food, it kind of just, it takes all the nutrients and kind of just stores it in your intestines until it becomes waste later on. So it's more like you eat enough food, but just a bunch of the food just leaves your body, So it's kind of like when you're like, I'm gonna drink a lot of water today and get healthy. So you drink a whole bunch of water, but then you have to pee like 15 times. It's like a lot of the liquids you're putting in are just leaving your body anyway. Is kind of how they describe malnutrition. It's not that you're not getting enough nutrients, it's that they're going in, they're just not going to the right places. So malnutrition, in terms of this article, is like a disease within your body where it's making your food and certain nutrients go to the wrong place. So I certainly thought that was interesting. A nice jumping off point. How do you fight this? How do you get some fat back into your body? But all things considered, this is where I start getting suspicious. Is after they lay that, malnutrition is really this disease that prevents stuff from going to the right places in your body, and it just leaves your body, so you're not getting any nutrition, and therefore you're getting all bony and weak. They then say, oh, well, how do we fight this? How do we compete with this horrid ailment that prevents you from being the best you can be? And they say, you can fight this by taking, I'm guessing it's called Sargol. It's Sargol. It's a Sargol tablet. Now, I don't know if that's just the name, based on the substances that are in the tablet, or if that was the brand name for it. And apparently, this scientific tablet, it's kind of really how they describe it, and it has these substances in it that help, when you take it with your meal, it helps make all that stuff that's not going to the right places actually go to the right places. So if you take it with a meal, it's going to make sure the nutrients spread around, so instead of being bone thin, you're going to gain a little bit of weight. And I noticed in the article, and this just doesn't sound healthy to me at all, they said, now they said 5 to 25 pounds, so 25 is on the high end, but essentially they implied people having gains of up to 25 pounds in a single month are not infrequent. And just for a general case of reference, about 3,500 calories make up a pound. So if you're gaining 25 pounds over a 30-month or 30-day period, you're gaining almost a pound a day. That means you're taking in, almost 3,000 calories more than you're burning. Now my body generally, my metabolism, I burn about 1,950 calories a day just being. So, if I do absolutely nothing all day, I just sit on my ass and I only burn that 1,950 calories, I'd have to eat almost 5,000 calories just to, gain a pound in a day, generally speaking. So, I don't know. Gaining 25 pounds in a 30-day period, and the fact that that was deemed infrequent by the use of this scientific marvel tablet, it doesn't sound very healthy to me. You know, if you're super thin and want to gain a little weight, it's like, you know, obviously that's one thing, but that one detail and knowing that this is some, like, you know, this is some state-of-the-art help you gain mass pill, but it's from like 100 years ago, I'm very weary of the people that chose to believe what this article was peddling to them, just promoting their magical tablets and just ballooning up. I don't like it. I don't know about you, but I don't like it. And I don't like these either. I feel like they're menacing me all the time, even though they're turning their backs on me. These things are like those tablets. I don't know if I like them. And they follow up that little medical marvel with, you know, the general statement, don't worry. Everything this pill does is perfectly natural and normal. There's no negative effects whatsoever. It's magical. It not only will help you gain some weight, it'll make you seem more attractive to women. It'll get you that job promotion you've been holding out on. It'll get you a new car. It'll put hair back on top of that balding head of yours. Everything that bothers you in life, this pill will take away. So after, you know, this little piece, they get done, you know, playing a nice little ballad for us about how great these Sargol tablets are. In bold, caution. And essentially says, you know, despite these marvelous effects of this pill, you should not take this if you don't want to gain like more than 10 pounds. And so I'm like, okay, that's not the biggest deal in the world. They're not saying like, oh, this can give you like a horrible disease. This can make you faint while driving. This can give you a stroke. You know, certain side effects have included death. But even that little caution kind of bothers me. And here's why, is like what if you only take it a couple of times? Shouldn't you not gain a whole lot of weight? And if you stop taking it, aren't you just gonna start losing weight again? You know, if you have this malnourishment disease, you know, you just have to take this stuff for the rest of your life. Or, you know, do you take it till you get like a little heavier than you want to be, and then you wean off of it till you get down to the weight you want to be? Then you keep getting thinner because you have a malnourishment issue, so then you have to start taking it again. Sounds like a lot of drama, but the fact that they're like, pretty much if you only want to gain a couple of pounds, they're like, don't take this, and they make it like a big caution. And I'm like, why is that? Why is it that they're like, unless you're planning on drastically gaining a boatload of weight really quickly, don't use this? I'm like, what the hell does that mean? You know, usually drastic, abrupt weight loss is not super healthy, with certain exceptions. And the same kind of goes for drastic weight gain. It's probably not very healthy, with some exceptions. But I don't think those exceptions include taking this magic pill that's gonna shove fat into your blood. They kept talking about I was gonna put food and tissues into your blood. I mean, I know what they're getting at, but I'm just thinking like, that bothers me a little bit, that they're like, unless you're planning on gaining at least like 10 pounds or more, don't use this substance. I don't know where to take that. I don't know where to go with that information. Again, maybe because I'm not a health expert. That just sounds a lot more dangerous than maybe they're inferring. And that makes me think like, nope. You know what? I'm sure there's another way to gain a couple of pounds without putting my life at stake. And apparently their reason for this warning is, why is, it's going to produce a lot of weight really quickly, is due to the pill's remarkable flesh producing effects. So like, it's not just that you take this pill and it's going to help distribute the nutrients properly. They're implying like if you take this pill, the pill is going to create new flesh in your body out of your food. I don't think that's what they were implying, but the verbiage, that's what the verbiage tells me. So I'm like, wait, what? How do you take a pill that produces new flesh in your body? That's how they say it. That's how you gain weight. It almost seems like you don't need the food. Just take the pill and flesh will develop inside your body. That was previously not there. Again, I'm probably misunderstanding some of this information, and I know a lot of it is probably inaccurate and or hyperbolic, but I just read through this thing. By the time I was done, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Why did I go into this video feeling fine, and now I feel frightened of an article that's like a century old and about some substance that probably doesn't even exist anymore. I really want to go and look now at the history and the effects over time of Sargol tablets to help produce weight, because it sounds like something you take if you wanted to take a regular human being and breed them into some exploding muscular fleshy freak of nature. And I don't know if I'm about that. That's it. Normally I just tell the story that I found today, but hey, this isn't even a story. This doesn't even tie into today's date. It's just something that was published today. I'm gonna go look this up. I can't, this is just too weird. I'm gonna look this up. All right. Okay, everybody gather around because you're gonna learn something today. You sit down, you put your listening caps on because you're about to. I was so right. And just for clarification, because once I finished doing the little bit that I did on this case, I was like, I hope people don't actually think that I genuinely thought these pills from over 100 years ago were actually going to fabricate flesh in your body, like man being established from the ooze of the earth. It wasn't that I honestly thought that was happening. It was more like I was bewildered by the fact that they would make such a claim. Now, obviously, this is a long time ago and people were making a lot of scientific claims back then. But it was more like, if they're claiming that's what's happening, what is actually happening? And honestly, there wasn't really anything bad about that. But all of my suspicions proved 100% accurate. So I started trying to look this up. And Sargol, if I'm pronouncing it right, and I really don't care if I am because they suck. So that name for their tablet, that was actually the name of the company. They were called the Sargol Company. They were established in 1908. And the particular piece that I read on their tablets that give you weight and fabricate flesh and tissue out of your food or out of nothing, I really don't know. They said take it with food, so the food helps it happen. But that piece was from 1915. I found a very old publication that actually went detailed into these tablets, referring to it as a get fat quick scheme, essentially, which I never thought I would ever say that phrase. But yeah, so 1915 was and that was primarily how they advertised. They sold this product in some drugstores, but they were mostly a mail order thing. So they promoted themselves through newspapers, like where I found their ad in magazines. Well, in 1917, they were taken to court and charged $30,000, which that's a lot of money in 1917. They were charged for fraud. Predominantly because after an investigation was done on them, they promised to like disband their whole company because their whole setup was big shocker, an absolute lie. And after they promised to disband, they didn't do it. So they were taken to court and charged with fraud and had to pay a bunch of money. They apparently had defrauded people out of over $3 million selling these nonsense pills. Yeah. So they promoted this stuff as, you know, this next big thing in physical health and wellness and what have you. But, you know, it was a very rushed setup. They had a brief consultation, and this whole thing was a scam. They brought expert after expert after expert up to talk about the substances that were supposed to be in this tablet that were supposed to, you know, give you weight gain. And they analyzed it, and they were like, none of this constructs, you know, tissue and mass and whatever you want to call it in your body. It was absolutely groundless. It was ludicrous is what it actually was. Which, again, like, I knew that had to be, because that's some sci-fi type stuff. Take a pill and, like, things will happen to your body. You'll gain new parts within your body by taking a pill that has a few substances in it. So yeah. And, you know, beyond that, there was no proof that these substances put together the way they were, there was no evidence that they actually helped you gain any weight at all. So yeah, even their claims that it helped you gain a lot of weight really quickly, it was nonsense. It was an absolute 100% bona fide scam. Why am I not surprised? And what's even more disgusting, in the piece this older piece that I read that called them out, tore them to pieces, they also said that in addition to just people that had, because all they talked about in the ad thing, again, that I read, was that it was for people that had, like, malnutrition. And just their bodies just rejected nutrition, and so they got really, you know, bone thin from that. But apparently they told a lot of people that had a succession of different ailments that ended up making them extremely thin, you know, from pneumonia to just, you know, any assortment of, like, random ailments that people could have that in the process of getting sick with them might, you know, emaciate you a little bit. They even said, oh, take our Sargol tablets and they'll help you gain weight back for that. So people that were already sick, and some of them dealing with, you know, chronic ailments, they were now trying to scam into buying pills to help them gain weight back, and these pills didn't even do anything. So these guys were real scummy. And that's kind of one of the things that brought me into wanting to, like, finally do an episode in this series about one of these many, you know, take this, it's a medical marvel type ads that I would just see popping up all over the place in these old newspapers. Because obviously, you know, the checks and balances of these types of health ads that were being posted in newspapers probably weren't being checked very well, so there was a lot of bad health information going around, and I just figured that's probably the case for a lot of these. So I do have to eventually do a video on this, and I saw just the title, Thin Men Who Want to Get Fat, and I was like, this is going to take me somewhere. I didn't realize that it was going to make me break my general rule of thumb for this series, which is, even if there's still things unanswered, I'm just addressing one story as it was posted that day, you know, in history. But for this one, I was like, I need to look these guys up, because I bet you I'm going to be able to pretty easily figure out that these guys were sketchy as hell, and it took me pretty much no time to find a publication from just a couple years down the road from the piece I read that showed, you know, within 2 years, these guys had been ripped apart, taken to court, financially broken on a fraud conviction, and they deserved it. So I have no worries about them. I don't care if they'll never be able to financially recover from this. Tiger King reference, I know. I haven't even seen the series, but I know that much. So I just had to go back in before I finished this video. I had to break my rule and go outside of the story itself just to see if this was really bad and how bad it really got. Now, it doesn't seem like these tablets had anything that was really horribly dangerous for you, so it wasn't like if people took them, they were going to get worse. But it was just they were being bluntly lied to about what it would do for their body. They were being sold placebos for cash and the promise that it would help you alter whatever, you know, adverse, overtly thin situation you were dealing with. Sons of bitches. So all that said, that's my wrap up for today's video, delving into that past a little bit. So thank you so much for stopping by, joining me today, for supporting this series, supporting my channel, for supporting me and my little channel. And as always, you want to help my channel grow, give this video a like. Remember to share the content around if you so choose. Subscribe, help my channel grow. If you want to hit up my Patreon, remember I'm posting extra stuff there, and you can only see it if you become a Patreon supporter today. The link to that Patreon is in the description of this video, as well as the links, again, to my Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Reddit subreddit pages. And all that said, thanks again for stopping by, and this has been Steve the Amateur Historian. I'll see you tomorrow.